Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Deuteronomy. Today we're beginning at Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 7. Now yesterday we saw that Moses had warned the people against spiritual pride, against thinking more highly of themselves than they ought to think, against thinking that somehow they deserved and were worthy of what God had done for them. He reminded them, it's all by grace. It's all by grace. And now he continues that thought by giving them a history lesson. He says, think back to our greatest failure. When we were at Mount Sinai, when we first came into covenant with God and first received the Ten Commandments, how we failed so miserably and sinned against God. He's reminding them of the golden calf episode. Moses says, remember this, never forget how you aroused the anger of the Lord your God in the wilderness. From the day you left Egypt until you arrived here, you've been rebellious against the Lord. At Mount Horeb, you aroused the Lord's wrath. He was angry enough to destroy you. Now, when I went up on the mountain, that's Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, when I went up on the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord had made with you, I stayed on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread, drank no water. The Lord gave me 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God. On them were all the commandments the Lord proclaimed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly. So Moses reminds them what had happened at Mount Sinai 40 years ago. How God had given them the 10 Commandments. How Moses had gone up on the mountain and stayed 40 days in the presence of God and brought back the stone tablets written by the very finger of God that contain the 10 Commandments in written form. Moses says, at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me those 2 stone tablets, tablets of the covenant. But the Lord told me, get down from here at once, because your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have turned away quickly from what I commanded them. They have made an idol for themselves. Now you remember, while he was on the mountain, though the people had the 10 Commandments, they had come into covenant with God, yet Moses was on the mountain so long they became discouraged, and they asked Aaron, Moses' brother, to make them an idol. He fashioned the golden calf, and they worshipped it. They violated the first 2 commandments immediately. Having another God, they made a golden calf, making an idol, and they worshipped it, saying, this is the God who brought us out of Egypt. How quickly they sinned. See what Moses is doing? Reminding them of the great failure at Mount Sinai. Don't think yourselves worthy of what God has done. It's all by grace. Even at the very beginning, you quickly abandon the Lord. The Lord said, verse 13, I've seen this people. They are stiff-necked indeed. Let me alone that I might destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven. And I will make you into a nation stronger, more numerous than they. So Moses says, I turned, I went down from the mountain while it was ablaze with fire. The tablets of the covenant, they were in my hand. When I looked, I saw that you had sinned against the Lord your God. You had made for yourself an idol cast in the shape of a calf. You had turned aside quickly from the way that the Lord gave you. So I took the 2 tablets and threw them out of my hands. I broke them to pieces before your eyes. You remember when Moses came down from the mountain and saw the sin of the people, their idolatry. He took the 2 tablets and broke them. Now, why did he do that? He was saying to the people, you have broken the covenant with God. Already you have broken the covenant with God. So it was a prophetic, symbolic action in breaking the tablets to remind the people of their great sin. Now, forgiveness came. We're going to look at that tomorrow. God did forgive the people and renewed them. But Moses reminds them, remember the great sin at Mount Sinai. And the fact that you are still God's people is because of his forgiveness and his grace. It's all by the grace of God. Never give in to spiritual pride, as if somehow you earned all this for yourself. Remember your mistakes of the past. But it was the grace of God, his grace, that forgave you. Same for us. We should never think more highly of ourselves than we ought to think. We should always remember, if it were not for the grace of God, we would be indeed trapped in sin. It is God's grace, God's love, God's forgiveness that rescued us from sin, that delivered us from slavery to sin, and made us a free people. We never take pride in ourselves. We always humbly stand before the Lord, realizing it's all by grace. What happened to the Israelites would happen to all of us if we turned aside from the grace of God. If we come to depend on ourselves, we will quickly fall. We must always stand in humility before the Lord and know it's all by grace. It's all by his compassion. It's all because he is willing to forgive. Moses reminded them of that. So don't ever forget your mistakes, so that you'll remember that God's forgiveness is greater than even your sin. As Paul would later say in the book of Romans, where sin abounded, grace superabounded. God overcame by his forgiving grace our sin and renewed us even again. Amen and amen. Join us tomorrow. In our next 5-minute study, we're going to see how that forgiveness came at Mount Sinai and how Moses reminds them of what happened when God forgave them, even of that great sin of idolatry. But we'll look at that tomorrow. So you join us for the next 5-minute Bible study in the book of Deuteronomy.